Hello and welcome back to Wellness with Delaney. Today I'm with Holly Swenson. She is a family and parenting expert. She's also an RN, and she has so many tips on the internet about how to raise a healthy family, how to take care of yourself in the midst of raising a family. And I think this is a really important topic in health and wellness, especially because a lot of you women I know listening are kind of around that age where you're getting ready to either start a family or have recently started a family. Really want to address you guys and make sure that you feel seen, heard, and taken care of. Holly, thank you so much for joining.
Hi, Delaney. Thank you very much for having me.
I am really excited to chat about this with you today. So, just a little background. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got into just working with families, working with parenting, and becoming an expert in this field?
Sure. Yeah. Truly from a young age, I've just been a natural caregiver. That's been my where I felt most aligned in my life. And I went on to become a nurse. So I used to work neuroscience in a hospital. And then when we got pregnant so we have four sons, and we got pregnant with twins. Decided to shift gears and really focus on raising our family. And so I did that for many years, and I still have all four of our sons still at home. So we have three teenagers right now and an 11-year-old. And a couple years ago, I really wanted to be of service to parents everywhere and help illuminate a more conscious path. And so I wrote my book, Stop, Drop, Grow, and Glow. And so that's how that really came to be. I wanted to give back. I see how so many of our parents in this day and age are struggling. If you look at statistics, and there's just a lot of folks that could use a boost. And so I've really had to learn different tools and tricks and partner with habits that really help me glow from the inside out. And I wanted to really help inspire this next generation to raise the bar to help them not only help themselves, but ultimately help this next generation that they're responsible for raising. So that's how I've kind of come to this point. I've also, since my book launched, I've been guesting on podcasts and news and radio, and I've just had a lot of really fun doors open and feel very much in alignment with my purpose.
That's incredible. I love that. And I love this message too, because I think we're in this interesting cusp in society, especially with women in their mid to late 20s, early 30s, where there's like these two poles, right? On one end, it's like this trad wife, have a million kids, live off the grid movement. And then on the other end, we have like the I don't want to have kids dink. You know what I'm saying? Like travel the world, no kids, all career movement. And I see on both ends I feel like there's women that are kind of just missing, missing the point a little bit and realizing that they can thrive and kind of have it all and find a life that works for them despite all of these trends that we're seeing on either end of the spectrum. So, and then just to kind of dispel, because I know I'm seeing a lot of women talk about struggling going into postpartum, struggling in pregnancy, struggling to find their identity when they have young kids, and everything in them is wrapped up in their motherhood, right? What would you say is one of the hardest transitions from being in a childless state to having a young family?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a number, a number of things really that you could touch on, but it is there. That identity shift is definitely huge because motherhood essentially transforms a woman's sense of self. So you're talking about things like priorities, your body, your values, different things start to show up in a way that maybe they didn't before. And so I think it's this time of both expansion and almost feeling lost at the same time. And so really like letting yourself feel all the feels because it is a huge transition. And I think, it's really learning to integrate who you were with who you're becoming. So that's one piece. I think you also have things like emotional and physical depletion that are real. And sometimes that doesn't get talked about as much. But, you've got sleep deprivation, you've got hormonal fluxes, you've got physical recovery that can really kind of sap that vitality that maybe you once had. And so being gentle with yourself as you're kind of finding a new rhythm. And I think, almost bucking that, you got to bounce back mentality with, just feeling supported as you rebuild who you are and who you're becoming. And then I think I would also like to just throw in this feeling of social isolation, excuse me, uh, because you're going from like being out in the world and maybe it's your career that you've put so much energy into growing to really turning inward if you choose to stay home with your family. And so that daily adult interaction shrinks, and so loneliness really can creep in. And even if you're surrounded by love, sometimes you still have those feels of like, might be feeling guilty, like you should still be working. Like, I know for me, I talk about this in my book of, I, after we had our twins, people would ask, are you still working? And I felt a lot of guilt, because I would say, no, I'm staying home with my children. But truly, you're working harder than ever when you're staying home with your family. And so I think you have to meet yourself wherever you are and find compassion for whatever chapter you find yourself in, and enjoying whatever season you're in too, like letting go of the guilt and just being with what is, however it is, and loving whatever chapter you are in. I think that's some of the best advice I can give our parents to be.
Yeah, I love that. I think people put pressure on themselves, and like you said, the bouncing back. I'm sure you've seen it, but there was a very big fitness trainer that put out a video not too long ago that was about a male who was like, "Women, if as long as you work out during pregnancy, you can bounce back right after." And a lot of women were really upset by it. I can see both ends of it. I'm personally not super sensitive when I see that stuff, so it never really offends me. But I understand why some women would be offended by that. And it's this idea of like you're valuable and sexy and powerful pre-pregnancy, and then afterwards like how do I get back to that as soon as possible versus embracing like all the insane things your body goes through in order to bring life into this world, and understanding that it's not just like ruining your body, it's the fullest expression of femininity in my opinion, like everything that the human body goes through to bring life into this world. So kind of with that bounce back culture, obviously I don't love that terminology, but there is a level of women wanting to embrace their health and take care of their health and just be at their strongest and fittest through all levels. What are some of your tips for just like physical health recovering in postpartum?
Sure. So I think every body is different, right? And so for me, I'll just speak to myself. With my experience, I did stay active throughout all of my pregnancies. Like for me, like daily movement is just part of keeping me feeling fit, mind and body, and even my spirit. Like I need that movement. I love fitness. But it shows up differently in everyone's life, and everyone has a different body. So I think in terms of bouncing back, one of the best things you can do is just walk every day. Like especially like if you had a C-section or even natural delivery, your body, it takes a while to really regain its strength, and and so I think walking is one of the best things you can partner with. That's gentle, and then you can build from there. But I think you also want to really reframe that idea that self-care is it's essential, it's not a selfish act. And so making time, even I say like shoot for 60 minutes a day, whether it's something gentle if you're really fresh off of having a baby, or if maybe you're 6 weeks out. I feel like it took 6 to 7 weeks to really feel like I could start pushing myself a little bit more. But give yourself that grace window to meet yourself again where you are, and yourself best. So if you were lifting weights, or if you were doing yoga, or if you were running throughout your pregnancy, you might be able to do those things sooner than others. And so it's really knowing who you are. You can have conversations with your doctor if you have concerns, but knowing who you are, knowing what you need and what you're capable of. It's trusting your own instinct and your own wisdom. And I do think daily movement is so important, especially for that mental piece after having children. I walked my kids a ton when they were little. So if you don't have someone to help you, watch the baby, take them with you, get them outside. It's good for everyone involved.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, movement is one of those things where there's so many things that it hits, especially if you're moving outside that walking component. Like, I know personally walking obviously feels good physically, but like mentally, just being in the sunshine, if you're in a sunny season and place, just what that does to your brain and spiritually just helps quiet the noise. I think it's one of those things that like is so beneficial for everyone at every stage of life. And people, it's underrated. People think that walking enough isn't as good of exercise, right? But like it is amazing. So with that, because also like, taking time for yourself does mean that there you need to be supported, right? Like a single mom who's completely on her own might have a much harder time taking those 60 minutes than somebody who has a supportive husband, mother, family, like a village. When it comes to finding your identity and just recovering and taking care of yourself in this new transitional season of becoming a mother, how important is community?
Oh, community is super important. I think for so many of us, we're living alone. Sometimes we feel isolated. We feel like we're the only ones going through these hard moments, but so many others are truly sharing that same experience. And so finding community, like it does take a village to child rear. And I think trying to do it all alone can lead to burnout, resentment, all of the feels that aren't really helping you on your journey. So lean into whatever support you have because it's going to make you a better parent. It's going to make you feel more cared for. It's going to make you feel more joyful. And you can be joyful as a parent, like, but you have to, I do think you have to lean on other people. And if you're blessed with a family that can help you, like, that's the best, I think. But for our single parents, it might be something like, I'll just speak to one that I know really well, like the YMCA, like they offer childcare for free for members. So if you
Wow.
don't have anyone in your life, like you're a member, you can bring your children in and get that hour or hour and a half to reset your mind and body and then go and so lean on resources in the community if you don't have anybody readily available to help support you in that mission of really reclaiming your own agency as a human being.
Yeah, I love that. And then so for like the family members listening to this, maybe there are men listening and they're obviously never going to be a mother, or there are people who are past their years, right? Maybe they have kids who are going to be having children. What advice would you have for the community members when it comes in like supporting new moms?
I would really just, I think sometimes we ask like, "Oh, let me know if you need anything." Um, but I think you can get more specific, like, "Hey, I made enchiladas today, and I made an extra pan. Can I drop one by for you?" Like, open the door to make it easier for somebody to receive your offering. Like, if somebody could use some support, maybe don't give them another thing to do or to think about. Just like show up for them, or hey, I want to drop over for 15 minutes and, we can share tea or coffee and just catch up. Because a lot of times, too, parents, new mothers, even new fathers are going through a lot. It's a huge transition. So to just show up, or you bring flowers, or you can, mow their yard for them, or, just think of things that are things that you have to tend to that especially when you're maybe sleep deprived or as a new parent you just don't have extra time or energy for because you're putting all of that love, all of your resources into this new being that you've just brought into the world. And so I think showing up in a way that's authentic, that's real, and that creates a level of ease is such a welcome gift that you can give someone.
I love that. Yeah, and so before we kind of move into like a little bit getting a little older and behavioral stuff, one more question about the newborn phase. So I've been seeing a lot on the internet people talking about like their newborn rules, right? So whether it's like no kissing the baby or keep visits short or all these different things, right? Like if you I know everyone's going to be different in what their own boundaries are, but if you were in that phase, what would your newborn rules be?
Oh, geez. Well, I think that's going to look different for everybody. I think it's your level of comfort. Some people really don't want anyone touching the baby, for a certain amount of time. Other people like have family members swarming from day one. So I think it's honoring your level of comfort. And again, that's knowing who you are and what you need, and then honoring that and at the highest level because you need to do what's best for you, especially in that sensitive, kind of vulnerable time in life when you're trying to figure out who you are, who this new being is in your life. And so just honoring what you need. And if you need people to drop in and be there and give you that comfort and support and presence, then say, yes, invite that in. But if you know that you want quiet time, you don't want people around, I would say honor that as well. So I think it's a very individual experience, and I think it's truly honoring who you are and what you need at that time.
Yeah, and I think that's like the thing that mothers have such a strong intuition. Every time I've talked to a mom with young kids, they tell me about some story where their intuition was better than the doctors or better than whatever, right? Like they know their child, they grew that child, their intuition is strong. So I think there's a level of like lean into it. And if you have a gut check, listen to it.
Yes.
That's at least my philosophy is I really do think a mother's intuition is very strong. No one's going to be bonded to your child the way you are.
Yeah.
So then moving kind of into behavioral aspects, which I know obviously this starts really early, right? Like your kids are sponges from day one and they're watching you. And I love you did a post talking about that, how kids are sponges. And when we're dealing with behavioral issues, it often can come from our own behavior. And so I remember growing up and even seeing like maybe some of the strictest, meanest, scariest parents heavily disciplining their kids for displaying the same angry behavior with each other, right? So, and then they were like, well, this doesn't make a lot of sense. So when it comes to that behavioral aspect, like how much of the responsibility is actually on us to mirror those behaviors to children?
Well, it's huge because your children are always watching, listening, learning from you. You're their people. And
Yeah.
so kids don't simply listen to what we say, they absorb how we live, how we regulate ourselves, how we show up in the world. And so and that starts from day one. They're, even when you think your children aren't listening, children are exquisitely attuned to their caregivers' emotions, to body language, to energy, and so they really are wired to learn through imitation, not instruction. So if I just think it's such an important invitation for our parents to really pay attention to what they're saying, how they're presenting, how they're interacting. And truly, in essence, like your inner world becomes their blueprint for how to live and be as they grow.
Yeah, wow. And I think this is like such a common trope too on TV, but just in general, like how many times have parents yelled at their kids for saying a swear word? And it's like, where did you learn that word though? Like if you learned it at home, if your parents are doing it, like come on, I don't know. But so with that, do you think is there still a level of like do you think that if we are teaching by behavior and our own mirroring, is there still a level of having to sit down and like teach kids verbally what that behavior is, or do you think most of it's just mirroring?
A lot of it's mirroring, I would say, and so if you are seeing things that are showing up that, like it's a gut check for yourself as a parent, like, oh dang, I've been doing this and I'm seeing it show up in my kid because, I didn't realize I was doing this. But your children are some of your biggest teachers as well. So we think that like, we're teaching our children, but man, your kids are going to teach you just as much, if not more, about life and where you still have work to do. And so that is an invitation to really pay attention to certain things that are showing up. And it might be something that you're noticing that isn't something they've been exposed to at home. And then that is an opportunity to sit down and be like, hey, where did you learn this? Or, unpack that with your child, because especially in the days of this digital world we're living in, kids are exposed to all kinds of things from a much younger age than we were. And so I think it's truly, you want to have those lines of communication wide open so that if you're noticing something that seems way off, the norm for your kid, that you are having conversation. And sometimes it can be, especially as kids get older, like the pillow talk time, like in the evening, as you're saying goodnight, that's a great opportunity to sit down and just like unpack something if you're feeling concerned or if you want to dive a little deeper. But definitely making time to have good conversation is so important.
Yeah, I think that open dialogue is really really crucial. And like I think that builds that bond too, because there's that level of like, your parents love you, hopefully, but I think a lot of kids don't even know that their parents like them. And like, do the parents like them? So I think having those conversations where you're just bonding and being open with each other is amazing. So with that, you mentioned the digital age. What are your thoughts on how young kids are being exposed to the internet nowadays?
Well, I think for a lot of our youth, it's way too young. I mean, and I think we've become almost too relaxed in the society because everyone has a phone, and so it's a hard thing to balance. But I think it's really, again, it goes to role modeling. We set the bar really high for our kids. So we set ninth grade as so they 14. Our kids are a little bit younger than some, but 14 waited till they got to high school to give them a phone. And they did have the watches in middle school, but we really wanted to wait. And we see the detrimental effects that it's having on our children and on our youth. And the recommendations for kids 6 and up is 2 hours, with the exception of homework. But most kids are getting like 7 hours a day
Mhm.
of screen time. And so depending on what they're consuming, that digital consumption is so important. And if they're watching the wrong things, or it's a lot of negativity or violence or whatever it might be, that is impacting and imprinting on who they are. And so it's so
Mhm.
important to have a pulse on what your kids are doing. And I just say wait as long as possible, but that is a family choice. That's a personal choice. And some kids also have a lot more independence, or maybe they're walking home from school, or they're, working families, they might need to have their children have phones at a younger age. So the typical recommended advice is between 12 to 14, but you see a lot of kids getting them in elementary school. And that's just tricky. I think you have to be really careful, and it's a slippery slope.
For sure, and it's hard 'cause I remember when I was that age, like, I remember I got a phone going into 6th grade, but there were no really smartphones. So it was a little flip phone. It was I could text my friends and that was it, and I think that's so different than nowadays having the whole world at your fingertips. I know for me personally, one thing I worry a lot about is just how many young children are being exposed to things like pornography at a really young age, right? And you even see really predatory sites. I've seen one thing that's kind of common is, like, taking something that kids are gonna be Googling, changing one letter on the URL, and then that will be like a porn site. Like, it's very sinister to me.
Yeah.
And that scares me a lot. Do you have, and I don't even know if this is something that you think about or talk about, but do you have any recommendations for just setting up that like child safety when it comes to the internet?
Well, I think, we use Apple products. So
Mhm.
what I will say, great resource is if you're having a hard time figuring out how to set the settings, call Apple or call
Yeah.
your carrier. And a lot of times they can walk you through how to make sure you have proper locks on your phone. But I will also add that no matter how vigilant you are, it can be a really hard thing to balance. Or even if you wait to give your children phones, sometimes they get phones from other kids, or they can see what someone else is looking at. So you can have the best intentions, but I will just say it's a very hard thing to balance and navigate. And so, again, that's where I think having good communication, so that if your kids do see things that you were like, oh, we weren't, you don't even have a phone, but you've had exposure, like,
Yeah.
just to be that soft landing for your kids to come to you if they've got questions or concerns. Like, I think being a realist in today's world is also smart, not having your head in the sand. So I would say lean on resources, lean on these companies to help you set proper parameters if you don't know how to do it on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another component to all this with the smartphone, the digital age that I know you've mentioned is also how EMF and just radiation might affect children a little bit differently than adults or more intensely than adults. What would your concern be there with just like so much tech use on children?
Well, I think so. What's interesting with this is that so children are smaller, right? So with radio frequency, that energy, they absorb it easier than adults. And here's why. So they've got thinner skulls, they have smaller heads, they're still developing. And so for reference point, a 5-year-old skull is about zero point 0.5 millimeters. At age 10, it's about 1 millimeter. And as an adult, it sits about 2 millimeters. So we don't absorb it the same way children do. And I don't feel like this is something that's talked about as much, but you look at some of these different, like the FDA, like they've said there's no established danger. Um, there have been studies done, but I think it's just having an awareness. And so you can take different things, make them part of your routine, like, maybe using the speakerphone on your phone instead of putting the phone right to your ear. If your child has a phone, not putting it in the pocket, putting it on the table, not letting them take these devices into their bedrooms or sleeping with them. Like, a lot of kids have their devices in their room, or they put it under the pillow or under their bed or whatever.
Mhm.
Trying to have some a healthy framework in place to help them have good balance with their devices. I also love, like, this isn't radiation necessarily, but like meal times, and having different times throughout the day where the phones or the devices aren't present. Like, really teaching your kids to have good boundaries when it comes to how they interact with these devices. Because if you have a phone in your pocket, or you have a phone on your person all the time, it's really hard to be present. You're getting pinged every 2 minutes from Snapchat or whatever whatever platforms
Mhm.
your kids love to use. It's pulling your attention away constantly. So really creating buffer times in your day where the phones are just put away. They don't go into the bedrooms at night. Meal times, I think those are some of the precious times to really teach your kids how to have that human to human connection and conversation.
Yeah, I love that because even as an adult, sometimes I struggle with that working in social media. I'll catch myself like walking around looking down at my phone. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, put it away, look up, like look forward." And I mean, I catch myself doing that all the time and I wasn't raised in this like the smartphone internet era.
Right.
So, it scares me a lot for future kids who are literally born inundated. You
Yes.
know, it's just it's such a different, I feel like it's kind of like we're in this guinea pig era where we're going to see what the effects are, and then people will probably pivot. I bet my generation will probably be very strict when it comes to a lot of that stuff because we're just starting to see the effects now, and it genuinely terrifies me. Like I know I struggle with extreme like screen use sometimes.
Yeah, I really feel like we're in the wild west of the digital age, and
Yeah.
so I think it's probably gonna be similar to smoking, and, I hope that we'll look back at this time like, "Wow, we really missed the mark here by,
Yeah.
this excessive screen use," and, I think hopefully healthier patterns and more balance will be in our future because I think we all need it, especially when you look at, the anxiety, depression, and I was just talking, to someone else before I got on with you about, like, loneliness, and then the digital, and how social media has really propelled this generation of loneliness among our young people. You think of older people as historically being the lonely population, but it's actually our younger generation that now is the highest percentage of lonely humans out there, which to me is so sad.
It is really sad. I mean, I think social media, if you use it to build connection, can be an awesome resource. But I feel like maybe a lot of people are using it to replace human connection or to find these super niches, that they build community with, but that's not in real life. And it doesn't replace that, even though it might feel like it replaces that in the moment.
Right. It's these superficial connections that, like I said, it can feel good, and I think to a certain extent it can be, fun to interact with. But we need depth as humans. We
Yeah.
need depth. We need true connection with other humans. You've got to put the phones away. You need to go have conversation. You need to go play or go throw a ball or do an art project or go volunteer in the community and do that without the presence of a phone if you can, because it's a richer experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is something I'm working on in my own life. It's like trying to plan more in-person fun activities and actually get together and not just get like wrapped up in everything online because it can totally feel like you're replacing real community with that. So then kind of shifting into, I'm really curious what your thoughts are on like different discipline styles because there are so many that are popular. We're in an era where I think a lot of the millennial parents have really gotten into like the gentle parenting. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so I will share with you the four classic parenting disciplines style,
Yeah.
and then the fifth emerging, which is what you're speaking to, that conscious or gentle parenting. So the first one is authoritative. Uh, then we've got authoritarian, you've got permissive, and then you've got uninvolved. And then conscious parenting is that's what I wrote my book about. And it's similar to gentle parenting. It's a little bit different, I would say, in that and gentle parenting has had a little bit of pushback too. So, I think it's truly knowing your children, knowing because we have four children, and not all of every child, every family dynamic is different. So one style might work well for one family, and it might work terribly for another family. So it's really also curling up with what your experience is, doing a little bit of your own homework, and then partnering with whatever style fits you. I mean, there has to be alignment there. So it's not just simply like blindly following one of these styles, but it's really doing some homework on who you are and who you have as children to
Yeah.
really help you find the best pathway.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we break down like what the different styles mean? I think a lot of people are gonna be curious about that.
Absolutely. So authoritative. So that's like the balanced approach. And so the core traits of this one are it's high warmth, it's high structure, it uses discipline to teach and not punish. And
Mm,
it also sets clear expectations and consistent limits. So um, and all the while, I would say, adding value to the child's feelings and autonomy. So it's calm, it's firm, it's empathetic. And this one can be a great one to partner with.
mhm,
And the second one is authoritarian. So that's a little more firm. It's that strict control oriented approach. And so the core traits for this one are low warmth, but high control. And so
mm,
this might be what maybe a lot of, parents perhaps experienced, but this one is more centered on obedience and respect, and more so than understanding and communication. So rules are enforced more through punishment and fear rather than guidance. And so this one can be tricky because it can, cause anxiety, maybe lower self esteem, and potentially rebellion in adolescence, just because that connection and isn't happening. For some families, that might work well, but I think we're kind of growing out of this one. That's my own personal bias.
Mhm.
Then you have permissive. So this is your indulgent, more lenient approach. So the core traits for this one are high warmth, low structure. So parents are loving and accepting, but they're more reluctant to enforce rules or boundaries. They don't want confrontation. They want to maintain that harmony. And so there are few consequences, lots of negotiation, and children can feel loved, but they lack those limits. And so there can be struggles with frustration tolerance and self-discipline. Some of that kind of stuff might crop up. And then you have the uninvolved. So that's more neglectful, the disengaged approach. And so for this one, those core traits are low warmth, low control. Parents are more detached, distracted, emotionally unavailable. You have minimal guidance, supervision, or even emotional engagement. So it tends to be more passive, more detached, more absent style parenting. And so it's more like, do whatever you want. I don't have time to deal with this. So
Mm.
that's not, in my opinion, a very effective way to manage or lead your family with the best to the best outcomes. And then the fifth is that emerging. So the conscious parenting. And this one I would say is growing in popularity. And it's really learning to become more self-aware in your own life, learning to notice what's going on inside of you as a parent, as well as what's going on around you. And it's truly rooted in that authoritative model that I spoke of, but it emphasizes more emotional intelligence, so more connection, more co-regulation. And so the discipline is seen as teaching emotional skills, not enforcing compliance. Now, with that said, I very much believe in boundaries and having some structure. I think boundaries really show people where the door is. It teaches your kids what's expected and appreciated as well as what's not. So I really think it's important to have boundaries in place, both for you as the parent and then also establish those for your children so that you guys know how to operate, what the framework is, what's welcome and what's not. And truly this helps foster more connection, more calm in the home, and reduces the power struggle dynamic.
Yeah, okay, I'm glad you're bringing this up with the still having boundaries, because I think there are obviously, like, components to I think my generation is really resonating with a more gentle style, especially how a lot of us grew up.
Yeah.
However, one thing I see a lot now with younger kids is, like, parents who now let the kids walk all over them, like, the parents become doormats, and you see, the super gentle parenting turn into these, like, nightmare children who just run the show. So how do you, if you're going to be kind of adopting that more conscious style, how do you kind of set those boundaries so it doesn't turn into a situation where your kids are calling all the shots and maybe turning into little nightmares, like, at a very young age?
Well, I think, you have to know what is welcome in your home. And so I definitely don't promote children leading the family. I don't think that's a healthy way. Children need leaders. They need role modeling. They need someone to show them the ropes. Now, with that being said, I think you can still have collaboration and learning to connect with your child before you just move to correction. But I think that it truly comes down to maybe sitting down and having family meetings. Like, what, if you've got younger children, not so much. That's a conversation between, the parents. But as your children grow, you can have them be part of that. But it can be things like, what's welcome in terms of, like, the, bedtime routine and school and homework and, meeting those daily activities. Like, what do you want to set the bar? What does that look like in your family? And that is not going to be the same for every home. So, but I would say opening the door for communication and getting clarity. Maybe you're journaling as a parent, like, what do I want? What would make, if you notice things that are feeling challenging, like, what can I do to find more ease here? What can we shift? It's about being, consciously evaluating your home life and noticing what's going well as what's not going well, and
Mhm.
then taking steps to remedy that. You have to be intentional with what you want. And if you feel like you're getting walked all over, that's an invitation that things maybe could be strengthened, because you should be the ones leading your family. And boundaries are very helpful in, again, showing your family and your children where the door is where the buck stops. You
Mhm.
have clarity in your own life of what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your thoughts then on spanking as discipline?
Oh, geez, that's a good question. I don't think it's personally, I don't think it's the most effective way to correct what's going on. I think there are other ways to mitigate challenging situations. And so I think it's, there's irony there of like, you're spanking your child because they're misbehaving, and maybe, but then you're teaching that like hitting is the way to course correct. But then, maybe your child's hitting their sibling, and then you're spanking them because they're hitting their child. You're or spanking and hitting their sibling. Excuse me. It just doesn't really make sense. Do you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
I think we are evolving beyond that.
yeah.
I think it can be. I think it can get your child's attention, and it might stop whatever's going on in that instance. But are you really teaching them the best habits moving forward in their own life? Do you know what I'm saying? It's
100%. Yeah. Yeah, and this is like I agree with you here because personally, I don't think I could ever spank my future kids. And yeah, same thing. My sister's she's actually a licensed counselor, and we were talking about this a while ago, and she was like, "So you're teaching kids that hitting is the answer." And I think some of the kids that were spanked the most became, in my at least people I've seen, some of the most angry adults, right? People who struggle with emotional regulation when they are pressed and when they are squeezed as adults and dealing with relational problems because like that violence, right?
right.
And like I want to be careful when I say the word violence because there's a spectrum of spanking, but hitting was the solution. And but then even beyond that, I will say, like I don't think that, and this maybe is a hot take. I don't think all spanking is abuse, even if I don't agree with it. Like I do know people who have kids and they like are very calm, like they never spank out of anger, right? They pull their kid aside, they talk about it. If they're spiritual, they pray about it, and it doesn't even hurt. You know what I'm saying? It's
No, I
like,
totally do. Absolutely. And I
yeah,
agree. I think you're totally right. And it is each family gets to determine what feels okay to them. And
yeah,
I'm not here to shame any parent. I think it's truly um, if you're finding whatever methods you're using to be effective, as long as it's, not abusive, right? It's then I think, your family best and you know what is effective and what is working and
yeah.
as well as what's not working. I mean, if you're having a lot of issues, that might be an invitation to go deeper into, okay, maybe this isn't working as well as I thought it
Yeah.
was,
Like maybe it's not the kid, maybe it's me.
Right.
Yeah, I do think though, yeah, I think when parents speak out of anger, and I feel like people are gonna get mad at me for saying this, I think if you're angry and you spank your child in emotion, that's child abuse and that's on the adult for not having emotional regulation. Because ultimately, like the adult is supposed to mirror that regulation and mirror self-control. Like we're teaching our kids to be disciplined and have self-control. How can we teach them that if when we're mad, we're like, well, let me grab the wooden spoon, let me grab whatever's closest and hit my kid and intentionally hurt them because I'm angry, right? And that's
Yeah.
my biggest issue.
Well, and I think too, so one of the things that I really promote is response versus reaction. So we have a
Yeah.
lot of dysregulation that goes on in homes. And so children can be very triggering. And so if you are like one of the things I promote is if you're in a triggering moment, give yourself a few seconds, maybe even a minute, maybe even step into the next room for a moment to regain your composure so that your child's emotional tornado doesn't become yours. You need to be the calm in the storm. And that doesn't mean that you don't have uh, you know, impose boundaries or have, consequences for actions, but you need to get yourself under control before you step into that. And I think when you are triggered and when you are unconscious, when you're on autopilot, when you're just reacting back, that is, I would agree that you need to gain your own composure and your own leadership before you start handing out whatever consequence that you feel is appropriate in your home.
Yeah, absolutely. And then kind of on this vein as well, something I've seen in certain, and I think this is maybe more cultural than anything, but I see some families where like aunts, uncles, all older relatives get to discipline and spank and whatever. It's kind of a free for all, versus it just being the parent, like whatever the discipline is, right? Where people allow others to spank their kids or discipline their kids. I personally, and I'm very open. I want to hear what you have to think, but personally, this like is kind of a red flag to me unless it's like a situation where maybe the grandparents are like raising the kids, from 9 to 5 every day. I feel like there would maybe, my guess would be that maybe from a developmental standpoint, you would feel less protected as a kid if your parents are allowing a free for all for everyone to have access to disciplining and spanking you. As the expert, I would love to know what your thoughts are, if that's like on base at all.
Well, I think what you're talking about too is almost like the generational patterning. So if you've got everyone in the family is participating in that type of punishment, I mean, I don't want to step on anyone's toes here, but I'm not a fan of spanking. So I'm just
Yeah,
going to say that again. Like
same.
I think there are better ways to connect and correct your child than that. But I think it takes a level of self-awareness and potentially shifting out of um, parenting styles that maybe are becoming outdated. And that's my own bias. I feel like we can do better.
Oh, I totally agree with you. Yeah, I'm not a fan of this overall at all.
And so I just think each family has their own work cut out for them.
Yeah.
But yes, I think the safety piece would feel tricky. If you're a child, it's like, okay, I'm going to grandma's or I'm going here, I'm going there, and this is the same treatment. I don't know. I mean, I just feel like we can do better. I think the bar needs to be raised here, and that truly there are better ways to course correct with children than
Yeah.
spanking.
Yeah, and I think you're right about the generational component because really, if we don't break generational cycles, they don't end with us. And I think a lot of people just think they're going to step into being a parent and it's going to all click and everything around them is going to click. And it's like sometimes you have to be the boundary setter. You have to be the one doing the hard work. And you're breaking off generational cycles. And let's say, like, yeah, maybe your family has a dynamic, but like maybe it's not the healthiest thing. You don't have to follow those patterns. You can set boundaries with family, and if they respect it, great. If not, whatever, you're building your own new family, and I think that comes first. Which, granted, I'm a heavy boundary setter. Like I'm one of those people that's like, these are my boundaries and I'm not budging, sorry. Like I'm
Yeah.
definitely not much of a people pleaser, so I know it can be harder for some people than others, but I think there's a level, like, if you have a kid, now it's your responsibility to make them feel safe and protected, and like be that boundary, like that barrier between them and the outside world when it comes to things that are like not okay, at least when they're little too.
Well, and I also want to add too, I think there's an energetic component too to sometimes the way we react or dysregulate with children. And I feel like, if you're feeling triggered that's the only way that you can deal with it, maybe put on your sneakers and go for a run. Maybe go
Yeah.
hit the gym. Maybe um, you just need to give yourself a time to gather who you are so that when you step back into that, you can connect in a way that's not damaging who they are as they grow. I mean, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Oh
So
yeah.
I think, one of the things I talk about too is like really matching your home environment with whatever workout you choose. So like I personally, like I've got a lot going on in my life. We've got 4 kids. And so like I love a good like hot yoga sculpt. Like I like to work hard. I like to sweat hard. But that helps me too that when I'm met with those hard moments, I can meet it with more grace and more composure. It doesn't mean it's not hard. And I have days that are hard. I have days that I misspeak and don't show up the way I want to. But I also really believe in the power of apology and say, like if like, hey man, I didn't say what I could have done better in that moment. I'm sorry about that. So you're also role modeling that when you fall short as a human. So we're all perfectly imperfect, but you're teaching them that when you do misspeak or when you don't show up the way you mean to, you can repair that
Hmm.
interaction. So I really believe in that as well.
Yeah, I love so many things you just said. One, you're mirroring humility too, right? Like asking for forgiveness, apologizing, you're mirroring humility. And I think that's so important to teach your kids. But two, the idea, like, okay, so like if I'm super triggered and mad at my kid, the opportunity to discipline will still be there if I wait an hour, right? And I think people forget that. It's like, okay, we got to tackle this now. It's like, actually, if you go take an hour, cool off, you might have and they get to cool off too. Maybe your kid is heated, right? Maybe they're not in a good place to receive whatever correction that is. The opportunity will still be there if you take a minute to kind of cool off and then come back and reconvene and then discuss whatever the path forward is. And I think that's genius because I think a lot of people, even in marital fights, let's say like there's no kids and like you're
Yeah,
like, we got to deal with this now. Maybe the best thing is taking a minute and each of you do your thing, cool off, reflect, whatever you need to get it out of your body physically, and then come back. And like, then you can have maybe just a better conversation than you would have had an hour ago.
that's right. Yeah, there's just the power of that pause. Give yourself a
Yeah.
little grace, a little room to breathe, and then come back to it. And there's going to be moments, especially with children, where you can't really take that break. But it's just an invitation. If you're feeling super triggered, if you're feeling like super angry, give yourself some time to maybe cool off in a way that's healthy. That is, I think, really great advice for our parents.
I love that. So then with this too, I mean, in a lot of cases, at least hopefully you'll have, a loving family with two parents who are together, right? And like that kind of nuclear dynamic. for parenting together and like maintaining a strong marriage, like what are some of your tips for just keeping that marriage strong and alive and healthy in the midst of parenting?
Sure. This is a daily practice. So I'm so blessed. I've got a wonderful husband. We've been together for many years now, and I just feel like we really have each other's back. And but it takes work. It takes I always say like wiping the slate clean every day, not keeping score, not, all of those
Yeah.
things that I think sometimes people lose sight of. And remembering that you're a team, you're not just like co-managers. I think sometimes the romance, fizzles or, you're just like assigning tasks, but I think you really need to connect emotionally every day. And I think almost use like team language, like we've got this, let's figure this out together, and don't always just talk logistics, have check-ins with each other, like how are you doing, what's working, what's not working, like really make time to connect on a deeper level. I think you also really want to keep that communication strong. You guys are going to be growing and evolving and changing um, all the time, and so the hope is that you are growing and evolving together in parallel and not apart. But I think
Mhm.
that's where you have to prioritize that connection. So um, witnessing each other, like witness that growth and celebrating, who you are, how you're showing up, making time for date nights. I really believe in the power of sharing a meal and stepping away from the family unit so it can just be the two of you to connect, or even taking time after you put your kids to bed if you can't get out for a date night, but like, put a movie on or light a candle, or you can do so many little things that feel um, nurturing and inspiring and really help you stay close as a couple. So I think it takes work and it does take intentionality and becoming more attuned to each other's needs and wants and then I think I would just add also like inspiring growth in one another too. So like yes, you're a mom and you're a dad or whatever that looks like. But you also have dreams and goals and ambitions. So then also stoking that in the other person as well as they continue to grow and expand as a human.
That's beautiful, yeah, and then so with, if you let's say you're a tired parent, you have toddlers or little kids, right? They're all running all over, and you're pretty depleted by the end of the day. Do you think that it's important to stay, like I wish that there was a better word, but to stay disciplined in having sex?
Well, I mean, I think that's a personal choice. I know for a lot of families, like a lot of couples, like they're exhausted by the time
Mhm.
they
Yeah.
crawl into bed. And so I know that's something that can fizzle. But I think I know that a lot of couples who maybe don't have it as often, others who do. And so I think you can have emotional connection on different levels. And yes, having sexual relation can definitely keep you bonded and connected. But I know a lot of people can also connect at a mental level, and it can even be like holding hands or making eye contact or brushing each other as you walk through the kitchen, or just there's so many micro moments throughout the day that you can also infuse that feeling of love and romance and keep that spark alive. So yes, I mean I think uh, that's a personal preference to what makes you feel the most connected to your person.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so okay, with the marital dynamic, I know one thing that I hear a lot that can really create conflict and friction, especially when kids come into the mix, is creating boundaries with in-laws or maybe like having toxic in-laws that don't even respect your boundaries or whatever it is, right? What would be some of your tips for navigating in a situation where one side has maybe parents that are not supportive or parents that are really disrespectful to one of the spouses or both spouses?
Yeah, that's a loaded question.
Sorry, I ask a lot of hot questions. I put you in the hot seat.
Other. No, I mean, I think you ultimately have to set your own limits. So if something really feels super toxic and it's damaging on a deeper level, then maybe you don't spend as much time with those people.
Yeah.
That's. But I always hate like saying like don't spend time with family because family is a very important component of your health and well-being and continuing some of that generational connection. But I do think if you have people that are so toxic that they're really taking away from your health and well-being, then maybe you do set limits on how much time you spend with those people.
Mhm.
But that can be tricky and that can be hard. And family dynamics are without a doubt they can definitely stir the waters at different times. And that might be something too that you work through, with a psychologist or somebody that can help give you real tools on how to best navigate challenging family dynamics.
Absolutely, yeah. I think this is one of the biggest ones I've been seeing too. I think also just and maybe it's with this world, especially our country, like now becoming such a cultural melting pot. We're seeing a lot of different cultures coming together, right, in marriage. And every culture, like I think the standard US family is a little bit more individualistic, right? You don't have that like hierarchy of a larger family structure versus with other cultures. And I know I've even seen this in my own family, me being I'm American and my husband is from Mexico. He's dual citizen, like born citizen in both, but we have very different family dynamics. And it's been definitely like something that hasn't always been easy to navigate because I've come from a family where my dad was in the military and he was always gone. And my mom just kind of raised us for the most part, unless he was not deployed. And then as adults, it's very much like you guys are adults. Like if you want to come for advice, we'll give you advice, but like you're financially independent. We don't have any say over you versus maybe a very different cultural dynamic where there's more of like a matriarchal hierarchy that everyone marries into. And I was kind of like, when I married into it, I was like, I'm not marrying into a family. My husband's marrying out of his family and we're becoming a nuclear family. And so you kind of have to, I feel like it's really interesting structuring those boundaries when you have different cultures coming together. And that's where I think it's been so important to have a spouse who has your back. Like,
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think, I also think too, though, where you feel rubbed, like it, or challenged, there's also an opportunity for growth there too.
yeah.
Because what feels tricky, I mean, sometimes that, and, whether it's with parenting or with your extended family, that it can be an invitation to go deeper and maybe explore, like, why does this feel tricky? How can
Yeah.
we soften this? How can we find more balance? And maybe there's lessons to be learned there. Maybe, you throw yourself into a situation that might feel a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe you learn something from that, or you sit with
Mhm.
people who have different perspective, or, have that more connected family presence, like, 'cause it sounds like you have the kind of that opposite, both ends of the spectrum, like meeting in the middle and maybe learning from, some of that wisdom that,
Yeah.
may spark something new and interesting, within you. But I think you have, you best. And so, finding your own rhythm, finding your own pathway as a family is important. But I think drawing on that generational teaching can also be healthy and helpful at times, as long as it's not, feeling too extreme or too out of your zone of comfort.
Yeah, and for sure. And like I'm definitely someone where like I'll ask for advice, but I definitely do not like the unmerited. Like and that's where it's interesting with my parents, obviously growing up is different. And now they're like my friends, right? They're
Yeah.
still like they're older than me. They have wisdom I don't have, and I do come to them with a lot of questions, especially my mom just being a woman. But I think she knows I tend to be a very private person. So like I will ask for advice, but typically like when somebody just starts telling me how to do things, like comes in my house and tells me how to do things, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know about that. That like it definitely can like rub me the wrong way, which I am very, very grateful to have parents who've kind of transitioned. I guess the last question, kind of with that, I was raised in like the Gilmore Girls era where you see these dynamics on TV of like the mother daughter, they're best friends, right? Like they're best friends. And then you hear like maybe that's not the healthiest thing. Like I think every woman dreams of having a daughter best friend. But then you're like, well, okay, I'm actually not their friend, I'm their parent.
Right.
Do you have any tips for kind of balancing that? Because I know you want to have a healthy, happy like relationship with fun with your kids, but differentiating being their parent versus being their friend.
Absolutely. I really feel strongly that you can have close connection with your children and not be their best friend. They're going to
Mhm.
find their best friend in their peer group. And so I think it's really important to have, like, your children need a leader, they need a guide. They don't need a best friend. They are going to find those with children, with teens their own age. Like, that's the reality, I think. And I think it can be tricky if you try to become their best friend, then maybe they're not learning structure or different ways of being. I just think it's really important to keep those things separate. And
Yeah.
you can still be a friend to your child, of course, be that presence in their life, but you also need to be the one that says, hey, we can't do that, or no, we can't do this. And a best friend isn't going to do that. They're going to want more of whatever it is they're doing that might not be good for them. So there are moments that you really need to swoop in and be that guiding light for your child, and it's not in the form of a best friend.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I feel like when you do that, when you create a healthy human being, then hopefully you create someone that you want to have like that kind of friendship with when they're an adult.
That's
And
right, and so
yeah,
and as they become adult, like, that's where where it becomes more appropriate, like, hey, like, the
yeah,
dynamic in the relationship changes because you're no longer molding them, they're in charge and they're autonomous of their own life, and so it is a totally different season, where I think it does become way more appropriate to be friends with your children as adults versus when they're still living under your roof.
yeah, absolutely. But yeah, that those children years is like raise a good human first.
That's
Let's,
right.
raise solid people first. That's the
Right.
priority.
Yeah,
So, okay, I love everything you have to say. I feel like we've just scratched the surface. I know you share so many amazing family and parenting tips. So,
thank you.
where can people connect with you?
Yeah, so I have my book, Stop, Drop, Grow, and Glow. If you're interested in reading that, that's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere you buy your books. It's also on Audible and anywhere you buy your audiobooks. I have my website, which is liveyourglow.live. And I actually have a parenting course that I'm going to be revealing very soon that's coming out in January.
Wow.
So if you want to be part of a community, if you want to go a little deeper as a parent, I'm going to have some amazing resources available, and that course is going to be called Glow Forward: Living with Presence and Purpose. And so you can join the wait list on my website if you are interested in learning more.
Amazing. And then, okay, final question. I love to ask all the experts. What's your current wellness goal?
Oh man, my goal is always to just keep learning and growing and expanding and really living my my truth and my purpose every day. Like I wake
Yeah.
up inspired to keep doing this work. I know I'm in alignment. I feel it on a deep level. So continuing to serve people is really where the magic lies for me.
That's beautiful. What a beautiful purpose. I love that so much. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I loved this conversation. I learned a lot, and I know that we have a lot of people who are just going to absolutely eat this up. So, really, thank you for taking the last hour or so to chat with me about this.
Thank you so much, Delaney. It was a joy.
Absolutely. Well, you guys, I hope you loved this episode. Please remember, you can always give us a 5-star review if you love what you heard today. And as always, we will chat soon. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.